The Supreme Court's overwhelming 6-3 decision to strike down magazine limitations forever dented the basic foundation of gun regulation that sent shockwaves across the country. But why is this decision made? And is there a small chance that the decision will be revoked? If no, it is a day that will live on in the records of American history for all time. This controversial decision has us wondering about the future of gun control legislation and the disturbing strength of the majority's position in the country. By a blunt 6-3 vote, the U.S. Supreme Court issued a ruling that will fundamentally alter American culture as it aims to end magazine bans forever. The matter of magazine restrictions has been difficult and divisive in the United States for many years. Limiting the capacity of gun magazines, according to supporters, would lessen gun crime and mass shootings. Strong supporters of the Second Amendment were on the opposing side of the argument, arguing that any restrictions on magazine capacity violated their constitutional right to possess guns. Years of ideological conflict resulted in a patchwork of laws that differed from state to state. The historic Smith v. United States case, which was heard by the Supreme Court, was at the core of this contentious discussion. James Smith, a Montana resident and avid gun owner, was engaged in the case. He had been found guilty of violating a state statute that forbade the ownership of weapon magazines having a capacity of more than 10 rounds. Smith and other proponents of gun rights regarded the case as a chance to contest the legality of nationwide magazine limitations. Chief Justice Evelyn Roberts, a staunch conservative who had been nominated under the previous government, was getting ready to deliver the much-anticipated decision as the courtroom came to a complete stop. Associate Justices Clarence Thomas, Margaret Chen, and Benjamin Hartman, all conservatives, sat to her right. Sonia Patel, Stephen Mendez, and Elena Walker, three liberal judges to her left, were renowned for their unflinching dedication to progressive causes. It was pin-drop silence as Chief Justice Roberts cleared her throat and proceeded to deliver the majority opinion. Today, we confront a difficult subject that has sharply divided our country. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right to bear weapons, which we must zealously protect. Mass shooting deaths are unquestionably heartbreaking, but we cannot ignore the fundamental rights of law-abiding individuals. The right to self-defense and the maintenance of liberty are fundamentally violated by magazine capacity restrictions. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the majority opinion for the court, which carefully outlined the legal justification for its choice. It emphasized the Second Amendment's historical background and reaffirmed that the right to keep and bear weapons were meant to be a deterrent against tyranny and a tool of both personal and national defense. Adding more to it, he elaborated on the effectiveness of magazine bans using in-depth research and statistical information. Only a very small percentage of gun-related killings, according to FBI crime data, included the use of high-capacity magazines. The overwhelming view highlighted that while each incident was terrible, a universal prohibition on magazine size would have little effect on reducing gun violence. We acknowledge the need to address the issue of gun violence in our society, the Chief Justice stated, yet the methods we use to do this must preserve the legal rights of law-abiding persons. Limiting the use of ammunition magazines does not reflect a specifically targeted strategy to further the state's interest in promoting public safety. Justice Sonia Patel voiced her shock at the majority's judgment in a dissenting opinion. Mass shootings are a horrible fact that cannot be disregarded. The Second Amendment's core principles would not be compromised by a small magazine capacity restriction, but it would unquestionably save lives. Governor Larry Hogan of Maryland ordered state police to suspend enforcing a state gun legislation on Tuesday that places limitations on permits to carry hidden handguns. After the Supreme Court ruled last month that a similar New York State statute restricting the ability to carry a weapon outside the home was unconstitutional, the decision to suspend the legislation was made. Justice Clarence Thomas said the legislation violates the 14th Amendment because it hinders law-abiding citizens from exercising their Second Amendment right to carry firearms in public for self-defense in his writing for the conservative majority decision. Today's action is in line with actions taken in other states in response to the recent ruling, said Hogan in a statement. According to Maryland's good and substantial reason criterion, gun owners must give a justification for their need to carry a concealed firearm. Hogan characterized the New York statute as being virtually indistinguishable from Maryland's, despite the fact that the court's 6-3 decision focused on it. I am directing the Maryland State Police to immediately suspend utilization of the good and substantial reason standard when reviewing applications for wear and carry permits in light of the ruling and to ensure compliance with the Constitution. Hogan really said these detailed remarks in the trial, but the fact is that witnessing those remarks shook everybody in the audience. Regardless of the fact that Hogan claims to have previously implemented responsible and common-sense measures to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and the mentally ill, his political rivals and proponents of gun control have already started to criticize the choice. This includes Tom Perez, the former U.S. Secretary of Labor and chair for the Democratic National Committee, and John King, the former U.S. Secretary of Education, both of whom are Democrats running for governor this fall. At this point, Hogan cannot run for governor again because of his term limitations. State statutes like the one overturned in New York also exist in California, Hawaii, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Prior to a federal judge declaring it unlawful, D.C. had its own concealed carry permit legislation. Reactions to the Supreme Court's decision were, to put it bluntly, divided as it spread across the country. Advocates for gun rights hailed the verdict as a decisive win for personal freedoms and the Constitution. The National Rifle Association declared the decision a historic moment for gun owners and pledged to step up efforts to defend Second Amendment rights. On the other hand, many who support gun restrictions were shocked by the result. Large-scale marches and demonstrations broke out, with campaigners calling for legislative action to rectify what they perceived to be a risky and careless ruling by the court. But to everyone's surprise, the political fallout from the ruling was swift and dramatic. There was intense pressure on members of Congress from both parties to respond. Others urged the appointment of additional liberal justices to the Supreme Court to balance the ideological weights, while some called for an amendment to the Constitution that would directly address restrictions on magazine capacity. State legislators also had to figure out how to make their current legislation comply with the Supreme Court's ruling. Some states, especially those with conservative majorities, swiftly lifted all limitations on magazine capacity, using the court's decision as justification for repealing earlier rules. However, other states decided to keep their restrictions in place, disobeying the court's ruling and running the danger of facing legal challenges from pro-gun advocates. Instead of making our communities safer, Larry Hogan is caving into a radicalized Supreme Court just one day after another horrifying mass shooting. In a tweet, Perez stated that Marylanders deserve a governor who would do more, not less, to stop the plague of gun violence. The court's ruling was criticized last month by Maryland's Attorney General Brian Frosh, who also foresaw an uptick in gun crime. The ruling will result in further fatalities and suffering in a nation already rife with gun violence. Our neighborhoods, streets, and other public spaces will become riskier if the practice of open carry becomes the norm. It will make law enforcement's work more dangerous and challenging. The epidemic of gun violence ravaging our country serves as a daily reminder of the foolishness of adding additional weapons to this already heated situation, Frosh added. But the Supreme Court's decision had effects that went beyond American territory. Governments and the international media kept a careful eye on the event, raising questions about how it would affect international gun control laws. Particularly, the United Nations came under increasing burden to reconsider its position on the global arms trade and take the court's ruling into consideration. The argument over gun regulation in America continued to go on with each passing day. While some gun rights activists claimed that the court's ruling had made America safer by enabling people to better protect themselves, others argued that it had led to a more dangerous atmosphere by increasing the number of weapons on the streets. Gun violence is still a problem in America. The topic of gun control became more prominent during the following few election cycles. Both party candidates laid out their views, and the political environment kept changing. Meanwhile, grassroots groups on opposing sides of the political spectrum put forth a lot of effort to turn out the vote and pressure MPs to support or overturn the magazine bans. In the end, there would be a discussion about the Supreme Court's 6-3 decision on magazine restrictions for many years to come. This ruling had clearly drawn a line in the sand, creating a standard for Second Amendment issues going forward and influencing how the country saw the right to carry guns. The argument over gun laws and the scope of the Second Amendment would undoubtedly continue and shape American culture for years to come as the nation dealt with the fallout from this decision. Remember to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from the world of firearms. For more Supreme Court videos, click on the video links popping up.